Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, today's guest is Mairead O'Connor, exec for the cloud engineering team at And Digital. And she appeared on my tech radar after I read about how she believes that people are approaching digital transformation all wrong because they're focusing too much on technology and not enough on people. And she wants organisations to create a culture of creativity where people are at the centre of innovation efforts. So I invited her on the podcast today to talk about all this and also explore how the key to upskilling is just making technology easier, and how we don't want people with obscure technology skills, and if we focus on making the tech infrastructure in an organisation simpler for people, the actual tech integration piece will become much easier too. Makes so much sense, doesn't it? So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to beam your ears all the way to the UK, where you can join us both in conversation today. Welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Of course, I'm Mairead O'Connor. I am a club executive in And Digital. What that means is I am the managing director of a business within a bigger business. And Digital is a professional services company of about 1,700 plus people. And how our structure is that we grow horizontally by introducing new clubs that are little mini businesses. I run one of those businesses.
Awesome. And can I take you back in time for a moment? Can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that possibly put you on the path you're on today?
Well, it's funny because it's not like there was one light bulb moment, or maybe it was early enough I don't remember, but I'm sure I've always thought that technology was going to be important in my professional career. Now, I've always been a numbers person and a concepts person. I love tabletop gaming. I love puzzles and that sort of thing. So there was an intellectual interest in tech, but also, frankly, an economic one too. I figured that it was always going to be a reliable way of earning a living, and it has proved to be so. What probably I didn't expect so much was how social it would be as well. And actually, that has been the part of my career that's been the most relevant, the most challenging, and the most interesting. It's actually, at the end of the day, yes, it's analytical, yes, it's problem solving, but fundamentally, it's about people.
It really is. And you've also mentioned tabletop gaming there. I'm going to have to go there because most parents will always tell their kids, you're not going to learn anything from games, or stay away from video games, or take up your time, you could be doing something else, etc. But I would say most of the people that I've spoke to on here were shaped in some way or form by their love of gaming, etc. So tabletop gaming, what was your favourite game there? Is there anything you could share around there?
Oh, well, I can say the one that transformed me into a tabletop gamer, it's a game called Dominion, which essentially it's functional programming, I've realised. And after you played it for a while and had lots of fun, you realise, hang on a minute, this is actually there's a lot in common to how you build a function, and lots of crossover. So I've got a 2-year-old. I am determined that she is going to play a lot of games.
Love it. It's your responsibility. Brilliant. And of course, it was that path that would lead you to And Digital. And I'm conscious there'll be a lot of people listening, hearing about you for the very first time. So is there anything you can share around the story behind the company or the problems it set out to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's coming up on its 10th birthday next year. And it was founded by Paramjot Upal and some other people that he's worked with in a lot of other professional services companies. In fact, Paramjit had founded and sold a professional services business before. When founding And Digital, he wanted to do something different. He wanted to have more of an impact on the world than in his past businesses. That's what interested me about And, is a really genuine, sincere desire to scale. So lots of ambition for scale in the UK and beyond. But not just to buy a bigger Bentley, but to make an impact globally. And there's some really specific numbers that Paramjit uses all the time about how we want to directly improve the digital skills of 200,000 people and deliver tech that improves the lives of 200 million people. And these numbers get used all of the time. And that sincerity about let's grow, let's impact, but let's think about people, let's think about skills. that's what makes And Digital different to me than other professional services companies that I've worked with, and an exciting place to be.
Love that. And I always say on every single episode of this podcast, technology works best when it brings people together. And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today is I know this is also a topic that's very close to your heart too. So here in 2022, a big question for you here. Why do you think people are approaching digital transformation all wrong by focusing too much on tech and not enough on people, etc.? Is this something you see a lot?
I do, but I also wonder whether we're not even focusing enough on the tech. I hear so much talk about transformation, so much talk, but not all that much action. I've seen a lot of examples of companies where they have, for example, they've established an innovation hub where they've tried to establish new ways of working in a particular area, or they'll focus on one product line that they will do, and it will be the new thing. And then expect that that's going to spread to the rest of the organization, and it doesn't. You've either got quite rightly the impact on the rest of the business going, well, that thing is different from my thing, and they've got a context that doesn't apply to mine. Their ways of working won't apply to my part of the business. Their tools won't work for me, so I'm just going to ignore that. Or the other point, and the reason I say I don't think there's enough goes into the technology, I'll often see a focus on a fairly superficial understanding of the technology. So maybe looking at the user interface layer, or looking at a particular use of data to do a dashboard of some sort, but not grappling with the really gnarly technology underneath it. Those really difficult questions about data quality and data integrity, about systems integration, about just modernization in general. All of the systems where people go, don't touch that, we're all afraid of it, we're scared of it, just leave it alone. But there comes a point where if you've done your innovation at that surface layer, where you've been doing this new shiny digital stuff, you hit the wall pretty hard, where you've got these ideas of where you want to innovate, whether that's through innovation through technology or process or anything. And you just can't, because at the end of the day, you need access to data that's locked up in a system that only gets updated once a day or something like that. And the innovation just stops dead. We've got to look at digital transformation in an even more ambitious way, frankly, and accept that we're going to need to grapple with those gnarly, critical live systems that our businesses are relying on, those systems that we can't just switch off to change them, but we can't live like this forever. So digital transformation, it's people, it's process, but it needs a lot more bravery than many places are showing.
And you mentioned bravery there, and also innovation. And I've seen that what happens in a lot of businesses is employees say, I'm not creative. It's those people over there, they're creative. I'm not a creative person. And you also mentioned a few moments ago, you've got a 2-year-old. And whenever you're around kids, you always notice that all children are creative and have curious minds, lots of questions and always creating different things. But as adults, very often we kind of lose sight of that and convince ourselves that we're not creative at all, which is not true. But can you tell me more about your belief that organisations need actually to be creating a culture of creativity and encouraging that, where people are at the centre of innovation?
It's interesting you say about people not thinking of themselves as being creative. I think our education system is part of it. There's this binary around, you're good at maths or you're good at words, and that one is a creative pursuit and one that's not. And I think that if you find a typical engineer, they might say, "Oh, I'm not creative. I'm analytical." If you ask them, if you have a deeper conversation, they're very creative and in really interesting ways. And that the creativity of problem solving, I mean, it's hard. That's the really satisfying thing about being an engineer. It's about solving a problem, a real problem that matters to real people, in a way that is effective and interesting. But there's even something about the aesthetics of a problem solving that I think sometimes hard to appreciate, that there is so much satisfaction in finding a beautiful and elegant solution to something. The challenge we've got is that there's just no time for beauty and elegance when we're up against a clock and up against a deadline, and we've just got to hit a milestone, and we've just got to do this thing, and we've just got to go to another meeting. And there's only so much time in the day, there's only so much energy to work on things. And so if engineering energy is spent on just keeping the lights on and doing just the routine stuff, there's no space left for creativity. So it's essential that when we're looking at creating environments for innovation, we need to make space. We need to look at the whole experience of being a developer and think, well, how do we make space? How do we make space for creativity? Because that's the only way that we'll really get innovation and satisfaction and happiness. We want developers to be happy.
We really do. And I suspect that every single person listening to this podcast has experienced clunky software or applications in the workplace. And when I was doing a little bit of research on you, I read that you said that the key to upskilling is actually just to make technology easier. Straight away, set off the light bulb moment. I thought, she's so bang on the money with this. But can you expand on that and what you meant?
Definitely. I will see this all the time around companies saying we just can't find the skills that we need to run our systems. But then you look at the systems and they've got things that have grown up over years and decades in some cases. And there's 10 different software languages and 15 different frameworks. And there's just so much complexity in there. And I'm thinking, well, of course, you can't find anybody that knows all of those things. Those things doesn't exist in the world. Now, you can bring people in and try to teach them every language that has ever existed, including some stuff that was done away with 20 years ago. But firstly, it'll take forever. And secondly, it is not a fun job and people will leave and you're not in a good place. So rather than focus entirely on upskilling people to have the skills that you need, raising the floor, if you will, what about lowering the ceiling? Make the platform less complex, have a more simplified architecture, have a more rational approach to tools and languages and frameworks and methodologies so that it's an achievable problem to onboard somebody and have them to understand it. You need to have your system, it needs to fit within the confines of a human brain. So by simplifying the platform, you are simplifying that skills challenge. I mean, we've had 10, 20 years of really talking about user experience in the consumer space around making systems easier to use for customers and users. We haven't really properly grappled with, developers are humans too. They are users. They have needs. What about thinking around what are the needs of the developers? How do we optimize for developer experience? And there's loads of space for improvement there.
And I'm curious, if we zoom out for the moment, where does And Digital fit into a vision like this that you've set the scene for today? And do you have any, examples of how you've helped a business build that kind of culture of creativity and keep reevaluating what their people want and what the outcome was, just to help anyone listening understand how it might work in their world? Because I suspect everything that we're talking about here will resonate with people in workplaces everywhere, won't it?
Yeah, so we work with clients that are at different stages in their life cycle. So, sometimes we're working with big corporates that have got decades of systems, and sometimes we're working with small scale-ups. And incidentally, you'd be surprised how quickly a small, young scale-up can acquire a complex technology landscape that's difficult to handle. You really don't need to have been in business for very long to realize that, there's a lot of stuff here and it's very difficult for a new person to understand it. So actually a lot of what we'll bring when And Digital comes in and talks to a client, some of what we're bringing is the reassurance that this is normal. Everybody struggles with this. This is difficult because it's difficult, but there are things that we can do to help. We try to think of the concept of guide, build, and equip. So build, obviously, we like to build things. So many of our people, they are engineers or people that enable engineers to build good stuff. But building on its own isn't enough in my mind and in the world of And Digital. we also need to be in that guide space around understanding, well, what do you need to build and why and for whom and when, and making good choices in the context of things, and bringing that cross-pollination, if you will, of saying, like, firstly, yes, everyone has the same sorts of challenges and struggles, and there's lots of stuff that we can learn from other people's experiences and other industries and companies that are doing different things. We can bring some of that experience that we've seen elsewhere and use that to advise a new client. And then we build things, but the equip part is really close to my heart. And it's a real part of the differentiator, that we don't just want to build some software. We want to build a capability. We want to build sustainability. We want to build self-sufficiency in there. So what we're wanting to do is it's that closing that gap from both sides, closing that skills gap by raising the floor in helping with skills, because we definitely do a certain amount of training and upskilling, and particularly through things like pair programming. So we will build with our clients' people so that the skills are developing as they're coming. But then at the same time, that lowering the ceiling, dealing with the complexity and making that skills gap something that's bridgeable. That's the ethos. So we work cross-industry, and that's quite deliberate. So we don't focus in on any particular industry. We think there's so much value to have that. I bring those ideas between financial services and retail, for example, and realize that when we're talking of single view of the customer, it's the same sort of challenge regardless of the industry sector that we're in. So that's a big part of what we can add as well. But yeah, the thing that's really interesting is that we are generally building something that's not been built before. We're generally working with custom software and with complexity on the client side, and that puzzle solving thing. That's always part of the fun.
And your passion for the work that you're doing here really shines today in this conversation. But I'm curious, I know you are, or you certainly come across as a solutions, not problems kind of person, but what keeps you up at night, and how do you keep things like your curiosity and open-mindedness alive to help turn those challenges and those things that keep you up at night into opportunities? How do you deal with that?
Well, the world is a bit of a scary place, especially now. There's war, there's instability, there's all sorts of turmoil in the financial markets. It's a concern. It's a concern as somebody with business responsibilities to look at what's the year ahead going to look like. It does concern me. I find it interesting to see those challenges play out with clients and with prospective clients, because I see a lot of challenge in trying to balance the urgent with the important, if you will, around seeing that there are certain things where maybe businesses don't want to make big investments right now. They want to control their cash flow, so they're putting things off till later. But I see the need for modernization. It doesn't go away. If anything, the more time that passes, the harder it gets. I mean, a lot of these sorts of platform challenges, if you don't do anything today, you're probably all right. If you don't do it tomorrow, you're probably all right. You're all right next week. You're probably all right next month. But if you keep kicking that can down the road, you're going to hit that wall where you can't do what you need to do with your technology to further your business goals. So I worry that the turmoil right now is preventing companies from investing in solving their really important problems.
Love that. And to end on a positive note, what makes you hopeful about the future, or what possibly excites you about the future and the road ahead?
I think it's really exciting how some things in technology, not everything, but some things are getting easier and easier and easier. If you think back to the first .com boom, think about how much money and how many people and just how much stuff you needed just to get a basic website up in the world. I mean, now it's trivial. If you are a small e-commerce startup, you can fire up something with Shopify and be done in an afternoon. And you can do so much with software as a service and platform as a service. And all sorts of things that you just don't need to care about anymore. I mean, whenever I'm asked about the public cloud, what's great about the public cloud is like you can pay other people to worry about things and you don't have to. It's great. And there's just huge categories of the tech world where you can pay somebody else money, and not very much money, and they will worry about it and they will stay up at night and you can focus on what you're focused on. And I think that's really exciting. And it's back to that making space for creativity. The fewer things that you need to worry about, the more time, the more energy you've got to be thoughtful, to be innovative, to be creative.
Absolutely love that. And to end on a final note of inspiration, I'm going to ask you, is there anything you'd like to leave everyone listening? And by that, I mean, are you going to leave them with a song for our Spotify playlist and book for our Amazon wish list, or maybe a podcast that you enjoy that you'd recommend to people out there? What are you going to leave us with today and why?
Goodness. Well, I mentioned I have a 2-year-old. I am not going to inflict on your listeners the Go Jetters theme tune. Well, that is the earworm in my head right now. I do love podcasts. I am very much a podcast fan, but I tend not to listen to business podcasts or read business books because I really like listening to history podcasts. And one of my favorites, it's Mike Duncan's Revolutions podcast, and he takes a different revolution in history and he goes through in insane levels of detail. It's amazing. And I love hearing these stories of times of change and turmoil and angst and the human stories around it, because it's human beings are human beings, and the sorts of drives and passions and desires and motivations that they had then, it's what we're seeing now. And so when I'm looking at our changing times and the turmoil I talk about it, well, I think it's easy to think that this is an unprecedented time. No, all of human history has been complicated. I love hearing about the complicated times in the past. So yeah, a crossover episode where, what the tech industry can learn from the French Revolution. That'd be cool.
It really would. And I think the older I get, for sure, I notice how everything happens in cycles and patterns. And I have seen a few episodes of Go Jetters myself, so I think that's not a bad theme tune to add to the Spotify playlist. But I won't do it for today. But for anyone listening that just wants to find out more information about everything that we've talked about today, or even contact your team, what's the best starting point for everything and digital?
So the website is and.digital, and.digital. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Mairead O'Connor. Very difficult to spell, but I'm sure it's in the show notes. I must admit, I used to be on Twitter a lot. I've gone cold turkey and my life is better for it. So yeah, the best place to find me is through and.digital or through LinkedIn.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today about how people are approaching digital transformation all wrong. The key to upskilling is just making technology easier, but all brought to life with your very personal story and those events on Tabletop Gaming to where we are today. So thank you so much for just taking the time to sit down with me and share that story with me today.
Thank you for having me.
For me, today's conversation was a real breath of fresh air, especially as someone who is passionate about the impacts of people and technology and how together it can deliver things that neither are able to do on their own. That is the exciting bit for me. But what about you? You've heard from me. You've heard from today's guest. What keeps you up at night? How do you keep your curiosity and open-mindedness alive? What insights can you share on what we've heard today? I'd love to get you involved and get your voice on here too. This podcast is never about me. It's all about getting the voices and getting those insights and stories on here. So as always, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @NeilCHughes. Let's keep this conversation going. If you have nothing to add to today's conversation, come and join me again tomorrow. I'm sure we can get you involved on that one. So a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.